Good morning, everyone. My name is Bill Giannone, and welcome to another Crest webinar. Today, we're going to talk about the 5 best places to invest in your company. Now, I'm going to preface this by saying, we're so used to seeing lists of the 5 best or the 5 worst. So when I say 5 best, it's almost tongue in cheek. I'm going to be talking about some things that you might not be thinking about. And I just want you to keep your mind expanded a little bit just to get an idea as to different alternatives on how to use your money. I personally am going to tell you that each one of these ideas that I'm going to discuss today are things that we at the Crest Network have implemented with different companies that we work with and different Crest members around the country. And most of them have worked out extremely well for our members. So I just wanted to preface it by letting you know that. So we're going to start with the premise that your company's doing okay. If your company's not doing okay, we're obviously not talking about ways to invest. We're going to talk about survival. But let's just talk about the scenario where you're doing fine and you've got some extra money. You want to put that back into your company and you're just trying to figure out where you're supposed to put it. That's kind of the premise that we're going to go by here. Well, let's start by talking about the logical options. The one that most people think about right away is, well, I want to generate more business, right? It's time to grow. So it always starts with marketing. And Dick is obviously a big part of the Crest Network and his focus is marketing. So I'm not going to discuss marketing too much and jump into his sweet spot. But the bottom line is when we're talking about a logical choice to invest in your company, the first place that most people look is on the marketing side. We'll talk about internet, pay-per-click, SEO, hiring a new marketer, doing more lunch and learns, throwing more money into the marketing program. And that's usual, traditional, and you get an ROI on that, depending on how well you research and prepare yourself for that. Obviously, I'm biased. I think that if you're going to do that, you need to have someone who can set up your marketing program for you before you start spending money. So that's why the Crest Network is such an incredibly valuable resource for your company. But again, that's just my 30 seconds of infomercial. Another place that's very logical for most people is to start buying more equipment. As your company grows, you clearly need more equipment. So rather than renting or rather than borrowing, it makes sense to invest in more equipment. And by equipment, I just don't mean these new, nice, fancy air movers that look like boom boxes from the 80s. I also mean things like trucks, other kinds of vehicles for your business, any kind of tools that you're going to be using out there, shovels and rakes and extractors, things like that. So I'm talking about your hard assets, what we would call your inventory of equipment. So that's another logical piece. You want to put the money in the company. And again, most people want to put them in places where they can physically see the money. I'm not saying this in a bad way, but I'm saying this in a way that is realistic. We do get a lot of ego when it comes to running and owning a business. That's just natural. I've said this many, many times in the past. It takes a certain type of personality to want to be a business owner in the first place. And usually it's somebody who's got a very high opinion of themselves. There's nothing wrong with that. I've got a very high opinion of myself. So I don't think it's a fault. I don't think it's a liability. But one of the things that comes along with ego is we want to also show our success to others. How do we do that? Well, shiny new trucks, equipment, those are things that really, really help. So when we want to talk about investing in our company, this is always a logical place. New owner's vehicle. Now, again, this is more of a vanity thing. Many owners will have a company vehicle as their own personal vehicle. So there might be a time when they want to put some money into their own pockets, but they want to do it in a way that, maybe avoids having to be taxed at a very high rate. So they're going to do things like improving their quality of life by investing in a company vehicle that is actually their vehicle. So I've seen many times at the end of a year where the owner starts driving around in a brand new vehicle. Now, a logical one would be something like this, an F-350 or something of its kind, a Maserati or a Porsche would be a very tough justification for a company vehicle usage expenditure. But you know what I'm getting at. Logical options for having some extra money to spend. These are places that we're talking about. So these are traditional places for most owners. So I'm going to ask you the question, what if I showed you some alternatives that will actually be better for your company? Sometimes traditional is okay, but most times traditional or the same old is not necessarily better. It's just safer. And like I said, some of them are ego driven. So if you're going to invest in equipment or if you're going to invest in vehicles, those are the kinds of things that are generally safe bets, and they're not necessarily the greatest returns on investment. Yes, equipment has a good ROI on it, but I'm talking about being able to really generate more revenue. Remember, if you buy more equipment, that doesn't in and of itself generate more revenue. It might keep more of the profit, but it doesn't generate revenue. It's not bringing more work in the door or more dollars in the door. So I'm going to give you a different angle. We're going to talk about 5 areas in your business that will give you a greater ROI, return on investment. If you've heard any of my podcasts or any of my previous webinars, you know I'm a big person when it comes to ROI, return on investment. I think, especially for companies that are small to mid-sized companies, privately held companies, you own your company, ROIs are really, really big, if not the top consideration. Every dollar that you have that's an extra dollar that you can spend, that dollar has to be treated like gold. That really has to be treated that you can't make a mistake. So I'm going to give you some ideas now. I'm going to stretch your mind a little bit, but I'm going to give you some ideas that are going to make a lot of sense if you really stop to think about it. Now, do they apply to everybody? No, but they're going to apply to companies that are probably in that $1.5 million to $2 million range who really, really want to grow. And I'm not saying grow to 20 million, even though that's possible. I'm saying you really want to grow. You're not okay with stabilization. You're not okay with, oh, I'm making 150 grand and I just want it to be an ATM like that. I'm talking about guys who are saying, I want to be a $3 million, $4 million, $5 million company in the next couple of years. Those are the clients that the Crest Network is looking for anyway, but those are the peak people that we're talking about. Just by the way, just again, back to the infomercial part, the reason why I'm talking like this and the reason why Dick talks the way he does on his webinars is because we're actually, preaching to the choir. We want to be talking and showing the value to our Crest members. And many, many times we'll have companies who want to join the Crest Network who don't really fit in that criteria. They might be a stabilization or bust kind of company, or they might be I just want to go on autopilot. If you're that type of a company, that really isn't something that brings value to the Crest Network, nor can we bring value to you. We really want to focus on companies that can grow. And along those lines, that's what we're talking about right now. Number 1, and I put this up there as number 1, hire a CEO. For those of you who don't know, before Dick and I got involved in actually having the Crest Network, we operated 2 separate consulting companies where we worked together, but we would refer each other clients and we would do classes together, things like that. But my company was actually called Restoration CEO, because I always said that the work and the consulting and the coaching I was providing to our clients really reflected the work of a CEO in your company. So of course, I'm going to think that it's really important, if you really want to grow your company, to hire a CEO. Now, why is it important to hire a CEO? Well, because chances are you're a guy that's out in the field a lot. The vast majority of restoration companies, both that we work with and that are in the industry in general, are what I call owner-operators. Now, the term that we use pejoratively or negatively is chucking a truck. But really, you are a guy who's hands-on. You're a guy who started out in the field, or when you started the company, you were really, really lean and mean, and you had to be out in the field. So your expertise level usually lies out in the field. We've run into very, very few owners over the years who are owners and not restorers. And there is a huge difference. If you're a restorer, your focus is on outside, out in the field. So if that happens to be you, it's really important to understand that sometimes your expertise doesn't lie in the office. And guess what? A real businessman is able to know what they don't know. That's important. Another important aspect. If you're a real businessman or you want to be a real businessman, the first thing you have to do is you have to acknowledge the things that you don't know or the things you can't do well. Like I said, chances are you're really good out in the field, but you might not understand the nuances of a balance sheet or the nuances of a P&L statement or how to break those things down or understanding utilization of your dollars and of your resources and of your assets. Those are things that business people understand. Do business people need to understand restoration? Not as much as you do out in the field. I just had this conversation last night with a Crest member, and he asked the question. He said, can I hire a production manager to run my field operations who has no restoration experience? He's thinking he wants a leader. He wants somebody who's really good at structure and process. And I said, those are good skills to have, but I truly don't believe that that person has to or can do that without having some intimate knowledge of restoration out in the field. I think they have to have a WRT. They have to have some practical experience. However, when it comes to somebody in the office running your company, I think you could bring somebody in to run your company who has no prior experience in restoration in general, if you want them to just be a guy from the field. Now, that goes against my own expertise, which is I've spent the last 14 years in the industry, so I bring a perspective of knowing the business and knowing business, which does give companies like yours, if you're working with the Crest Network, a bit of a head start. So I'm not trying to talk out of both sides of my mouth. If they do have experience, it's so much better. But it's going to be very difficult to find somebody who's a businessman with restoration experience. It's just because most of the field are the owner-operator types. Now, if you think about this logically, anytime you hear of one of the major Fortune 100 companies hiring a new CEO, there's a really good chance that they're from outside of the business that they're coming into. The picture of the gentleman here is actually the new CEO of Starbucks, because the old CEO was the founder and owner. And when he wanted to kind of retire and get out of the business, they brought in a guy, and he's from an entirely different field. He did not come up in Starbucks. He wasn't a promotion. So that's why I'm saying hiring a CEO. I didn't say promote a CEO. I said hire a CEO. It's okay to bring somebody in from outside, and it's really important to understand why. If you're able to hire someone to run your business, it'll allow you to grow your business the right way. These guys are going to be able to see areas within your company that are not functioning properly. They're going to make quick changes. Anytime we make a change within our company that helps productivity, helps any kind of the financial side of our business, we automatically make our business more valuable and more profitable. Again, this guy has not brought in another job to your business, but he's taking your business and making it more profitable because he's going to make it run better. This is going to be the trend throughout all of the things that I'm going to talk about, these 5 top tips. And this is, again, I apologize in advance to Dick. None of these have anything to do with bringing in more leads. Number 2 top thing, use a salesman to sell, not a project manager. What does this mean? Again, most people in our industry, we consider ourselves to be short-staffed, so we're going to have people doing many, many tasks. So we get a lead from our marketer, and then our marketer sends that lead into the office. There's a really, really good chance that most, if not all of you, are using either a lead tech or a project manager to go out and sign up that job. So you have to stop doing that. And the reason why I say you have to stop doing that is because what are we asking these people to do? We're asking somebody whose main job is production to do sales, to be a closer. They are two entirely different skill sets. And yet, because we have to be lean and mean, quote unquote, we have to justify it by saying, well, we can't afford more employees, so we're going to just make these people do it. We don't have enough work, so we're just going to make people do 2 or 3 things at once. That's all well and good. But when you look at it this way, a real closer can raise your closing ratio by 20%. This is not a guess. This is not a maybe. This is documented facts by everybody that we've worked with in the Crest Network who has implemented this plan. When our Crest members go out and hire salesmen and assign that responsibility strictly to a salesman, their closing ratios have gone up. Now, it might take a couple of years, but their closing ratios have gone up by 20%. If you're a company that's generating just 1 lead a day, there's a really good chance you're closing half of them. So you're only getting, out of 30 jobs a month, you're only getting 15 of them, 50%. If I take 30 leads and I go to 70% closing ratio, that's 6 more jobs a month. Just think about how much money that means. 6 more jobs a month is over 70 jobs, call it 75 jobs a year from the same leads you're generating now, however you're generating them. So that amounts to hundreds of thousands of dollars for every single one of those leads. That's leads you're already getting. Again, if you implement this system and you invest in a salesman, not more marketers, not more crews, but more salesmen. If you invest in a salesman, you are literally bringing your business to a different level. This is something that's very clear and very evident in every one of the companies where we've installed this process. But it's something very few people want to do because they just don't see the value. I think it's pretty clear here how we've shown you the value. Along those lines, on the back end of the process, hire someone specifically just to write your invoices and to collect the money. Now, why would we do this? There's certainly not a ton of work to do that, right? If I'm only doing 15 jobs a month, why would I need to hire someone just to do that for me? I could have my project manager write it up. I'll send them to an Xactimate class. He's perfectly fine. You know, I know a lot of companies, they have their crews fill out a bunch of tick sheets. And then the tick sheets come into the office and just one of the office staff that's answering phones can type in those things into Xactimate. How difficult could it be? You know, you cut drywall, you type it into Xactimate. That doesn't take a rocket scientist, right? Well, guess what, guys? The industry is definitely changing. There needs to be a full, complete invoice created. You need to have proper documentation that gets submitted. And I'm sorry, you need to communicate with the carriers. I know there's tons of people out there on the internet telling you that our job is not to talk to the carriers. That's the homeowner's responsibility. We submit our bill to the homeowner. We don't care. The homeowner owes us the money. That's great. If you want to be a boutique company, like I always say, then that's fine. But if you want to be that company, nothing I'm going to say in this webinar is going to make sense to you, nor is it something you should be focused on, because none of these other things are going to matter to you, because you'll always be a boutique company. Unless you're willing to play the game as it's defined by everybody, not just you, then you're always going to be a small boutique company. And there's nothing wrong with that if that's what you want. But if you want to grow your business, listen, we don't get to set the rules of the game. We only get to play the game better than everyone else. So the rules of the game are set by the people who control it. They're the people who have the money. Pardon me. If you're the type of person who understands this, then you're going to want to play the game all the way through to the end. And guess what? The most important part of the game right now is having a very functional invoicing and collections process. This is the best way to increase your revenue on the back end. How many of you are submitting invoices right now that are constantly going to third-party administrators or peer review, and you're getting beat up and chopped down? And because you just don't have somebody who's really, really good at doing this, you're just forced to accept what they send. Now you have to make a decision. Do I want to fight with that person more? Do I want to fight with my client to get the rest of the money, or do I just want to move on? Well, shouldn't you have an expert doing all of this? I think you should. I think it's very important to hire somebody whose sole job it is to write invoices and to collect. They're not part of marketing, they're not part of sales, and they're not part of production. They're an independent person. This is a different mindset for most of you because, again, most of you, if you're $1 million to $2 million company, you've got guys wearing many hats. You can't be a $5 million company with those same people wearing those same hats. You'll just strain your talent base too far. You need to invest your money into these other pieces. And by doing this, the average invoice collection goes up by about $1,500. I know that sounds bizarre, but how does it go up by that much? You're not getting cut by that much, probably, for most of you. Well, I'm going to ask you this. What is your average invoice amount? Uncomfortable pause. Your average invoice amount is a very, very important number that every single one of you should know. In the United States of America, if you're on a non-program loss, so if you didn't get the loss from a TPA, so a non-program loss, the average invoice in America right now is $6,000. And you're getting cut about 15% on that. So what are you collecting? 15% cut on $6,000 is a $900 cut. So for argument's sake, let's just say you're collecting $5,000. Well, I'm here to tell you, we're working with companies within the Crest network whose average invoice is over $8,000, and they're collecting more than 90% of that amount because they have employed this technique of having an expert to write, and they're writing full, complete invoices. They're providing an incredible level of documentation, and they're fighting really hard because they're an expert who knows the language. So they will anticipate the rejections before they come, provide the explanations for them, and get paid a much higher rate. Their average invoices are much, much higher. But generally speaking, you could raise your invoice and collections amount by about $1,500. Once again, let's do the numbers. If you do 15 jobs a month, forget what I said about going to 21, but just right now, on the 15 jobs you're doing, if you collected 1,500 extra a month on 15 jobs, we're talking another hundreds of thousands of dollars by the end of the year. What's it costing you to bring that person on? A fraction of that. And remember, this person can do this for you as you scale up to 20, 30, 40 jobs. We have people who are able to invoice with a good system. We have people who are able to invoice 50 and 60 jobs every single month and then fight. Because remember, you don't fight for every single one of your dollars. Sometimes the good companies will look at you if you provided really efficient, deep documentation. They'll cut that check within 2 weeks and you'll have it in your bank account. So it's not like they have to write and fight on 50 jobs. They have to write 50. They might have to fight on 10 or 20. But a good, really expert person can do that. So just think about that value they're bringing you on 50 jobs a month. 1,500 times 50 jobs a month is almost $1 million of extra money at the end of the year. We're talking an incredible amount of value that this person can bring you. Number 4, the fourth place I want you to invest. I want you to invest in technology, but in every area of your company. I don't mean the shiny new toys that you're going to walk around with. I mean investing in technology in every area of your company that's going to make everything else more efficient. So make your team work smarter, not harder. Technology is always scary for us, especially if it involves change. If we're the type of company that's very paper driven right now, when I say the word technology, everybody cringes and they come up with all the same excuses that we've heard for the last 10, 15 years. Well, you know what? Guys in the field are terrible with technology. And you're right. But guys in the field are terrible with paperwork as well. But your system works because you forced them to be good at it. If you force them to be good at technology, they're going to embrace it. Now, where are we talking about? I'm talking about every aspect of your company. I'm talking about electronic time cards, clocking in and out, using an app so that when they move from one job to the other, they're accountable, and you know exactly how much time they're spending on each job. CRM systems. If you don't use a CRM, a management software for both your clients and for your jobs, then you're way behind the eight ball. Even going so far as now they have sketching tools. You've heard of things like Xactimate, Matterport, DocuSketch. Within Xactimate, these things are very functional. They are tools that will speed up your work. They will improve your accuracy. They will make your company more efficient. Efficiency equals more profit. If your guys can work faster and smarter, they're going to be able to do more for you, and they're going to be able to provide you with better documentation. I talked about your invoicing. If you have really good documentation, your invoice is going to be able to go up. This is a way that you can invest to ensure that that can happen. But it's also going to be things like how much waste is in your company right now. Those are really important things that you should be able to study. Using technology, you're going to be able to find those answers much quicker. It's really important that you embrace technology. Finally, think about opening a new division in your company. Now, Dick Wagner will tell you that if you're a jack of all trades, you're a master of none, and he's absolutely right. From a marketing standpoint, it's a terrible idea to have a list of services on your website that lists 42 or 50 different things that you do. But I'm talking about core business model always being water damage restoration. Your mitigation and your water damage mitigation should always be your core model. But why would I suggest to open a new division in your company? Well, the most important reason for that is because you could find ways to get more juice out of the squeeze. What do I mean by that? Well, by offering other services, you can bill more from each existing client. Think about those 15 jobs you've already got. How many of those 15 jobs are going to require a putback, a repair? How many of those 15 jobs may have required or could have required a pack out? On those 15 jobs, how many of them had some sort of environmental hazard, like a trauma scene or a lead or asbestos issue? If you farmed any of that out, that's a warm or a hot lead that you sent to another company. How many warm or hot leads are you getting? You're already getting those, the ones you're signing up for your mitigation. Why wouldn't you think about the prospect of entertaining the idea of opening a new division to be able to capture that revenue? Everyone's efforts leading up to signing that job, from marketing to sales, even through production, are going to lead to a higher revenue and profit for your company. Think about that for a second. I know it's a scary thing. And I know you're sitting there saying, oh, I've heard nightmares about companies that do repairs as well. But I'm also going to tell you that the reality is that there are advantages along with the disadvantages. And if you're going all in and you're going to invest in a whole bunch of my different ideas, you're going to see that there's far more strength to the advantages, and they far outweigh the disadvantages. All right, I gave you those 5. Now we're going to talk about why they work. I really want to cover this in more detail. The CEO, why does this work? There's a lot of words on here, so I'm going to read it and then I'm going to kind of explain it a little bit. Hiring a CEO will enable your company to get every possible dollar of profit out of your existing business. Once again, I'm starting with the premise that we're trying to take what we've got already and grow that part of it, because then as we grow the marketing aspect of our business, we've got an even bigger balloon. So what I'm doing is I'm trying to take your existing balloon and make it bigger before we blow air into it. That's an analogy that I use a lot. The air is marketing, right? But the balloon itself is your capacity, is your capabilities. By hiring a CEO, he's going to make sure that everything's running in your company extremely properly. He's going to install processes in your company, and process is the driving force between efficiency and profitability. When they take the wheel, they're going to focus on improving productivity, reducing waste of both time, your staff, and materials, your purchases, and finding ways to purchase things with better margins. For instance, one of the things that I did when I started working at a company here in Atlanta is I made them start purchasing scheduled and in bulk. They used to have guys going to Home Depot whenever they needed something, and that became haphazard and kind of chaotic. And we were purchasing what I would call retail. Well, when you're a company that over the course of a year, you're going to go through thousands of boxes of garbage bags, it makes perfect sense, if you've got the warehouse space, to buy those garbage bags in bulk, buy them by the pallet. And by doing so, we were able to lower our costs by 20 to 30%. Now, it doesn't sound like a lot, but if you're a company that's doing $2 million a year, I probably just on that one move saved us $20,000. $20,000 is a lot of money for a $2 million company. It's 1%. If I could save 1% in 5 different areas, I just made the owner $100,000. I'm telling you, a CEO can find 1% savings in about 10 different areas of your company. I'm not saying you're doing it wrong. I'm just saying they're going to do it better. The CEO will more than pay for himself in the first year, leaving you to focus on the things you do best, marketing or production, or just leading your team. So I asked the question at the bottom, and you're going to see this on just about each one of our slides when we talk about the 5 suggestions, is can you afford not to hire a CEO? That's always a good question. People always say, hey, can I afford to hire you? And I always say, well, can you afford not to hire me? And I leave it as an open-ended question. Why does the salesman work? Using a trained sales professional to close your leads will improve your closing ratio. Period, end of sentence, should be end of paragraph. But I always have to keep going on. I'm a little wordy. Closing ratios rise from an average of 45%, that is the national average, if we're really being honest with ourselves, on counting every single inquiry that comes into our office, the national closing ratio is about 45%. A salesman who just sells will get that to well over 65%. There are some sales teams that we work with whose closing ratios exceed 80%. Yes, you're reading that correctly. Their closing ratios exceed 80%. All this extra work will raise your revenue and profit by a multiple of what you will pay your salesman. Yes, you have to pay a salesman. You have to pay him a salary. You have to pay him commissions. And the salary could be hourly or a fixed rate. If they're going to be running out after hours and on weekends, some states would require you to pay them an hourly rate. Again, we could talk about compensation, but even the most highly compensated salesmen are going to produce a multiple well above. And remember, that's going to increase every aspect of your company. It's going to mean you're going to have more production. You might have more invoicing because these people might be much better at what they're selling. So they're going to be able to sell to a higher client as well. Imagine making an extra $50,000 per month without any changes to your marketing program. Is this investment worth your investment in time? Unbelievable. Invoicing. Think about it. You hire someone with Xactimate experience who knows how to talk to adjusters. That's the person I'm specifically talking about. What would your invoices look like? Would they look the same as they do now? And how much more could you get out of the carrier? You know the answer to this question. In a couple of the companies we work with, we've instructed them and they've gone ahead and done this. They've gone and hired former adjusters. Adjusters know Xactimate. That's one of the first things they're taught. So adjusters know Xactimate. What else do adjusters know? They know the scripts on what's the denial of the month. Why aren't we paying for PPE? Why aren't we paying for the emergency service call? Why are we denying overhead and profit? They understand all those rejections. So they're the best one to talk. Hey, I've been in your shoes, but here's what the reason is. We treat the most important part of our financial process, and by financial process, I mean the overall heartbeat and health of our company. Money is the heartbeat of our company. Everything else feeds the heart, which is the money. We treat that process as an afterthought. We always say, oh, you know what? When we're really busy, we'll just hold off on marketing. We need everybody else to do everything else, and we'll catch up on it when we can. We don't worry about it. We don't think it requires an expert or anybody can collect money. It's our invoice. How tough could it be? If we focus on this part as much as we focus on everything else regarding the job, our end results are going to be staggering. We're going to get a larger percentage of our invoice, which will be higher than before. So I'm asking, can we focus? How can we focus on the end before we even start? This is the way we can do that. Let's talk about technology a little bit. Giving your team the tools to work faster and better while having the ability to analyze data is truly a win-win. I didn't talk about that aspect before. I talked about the practical aspects for your team, but using technology also affords us the ability to analyze data. A CRM, a company cam, those kinds of technologies are going to give us the opportunity to go into that technology to analyze. Company cam is a cloud-based photo storage system that a lot of our Crest members use, enabling your guys, instead of taking pictures and uploading them into Dropbox or saving them on their phone or not even taking a lot of photographic documentation, is kind of being behind the eight ball, but using something like a company cam allows people literally in real time, as they are uploading the pictures, to analyze the extent of the loss, analyze the work being done, analyze the quality of the work that you're doing. We've got project managers who don't spend a ton of time with the crews out in the field because they can sit in an office and they can look at company cam in real time, and they could be managing 2 or 3 crews at the same time, giving them direction on what to do because they're monitoring it in real time. You could use streaming. You could use, Apple streaming mechanisms. You could use Zoom meetings where the guy's literally walking around with a tablet showing the loss to a project manager who's no longer out in the field. I'm not saying project managers shouldn't be out in the field, but you can leverage the ability for someone to analyze data real time to your advantage, and that's truly a win-win. So you could do exactly that with these new programs and tools. Using a CRM for marketing, sales, production, and financial tracking. Use Matterport or DocuSketch for better scoping and billing. If you have a better scope of work and a better sketch, you're going to make more money. Tracking your employees' time with a T-Sheets type, device, and their travel, using a monitoring pod that goes into your vehicles, being able to track their vehicle usage. Those are things that are going to absolutely improve your productivity. They're going to save you thousands of previously wasted dollars. Forget about making you more money. They're going to save you money that's already in your company, but being burned. So it's time. This isn't a question. It's time to take your company into the 21st century. For those of you who are not employing technology in every aspect of your business, you really need to talk to Dick or myself. This is a very, very important miss on a lot of companies. And then finally, the last suggestion I gave you, opening a new division. This might be a frightful suggestion for some. Opening a new division might be difficult, but think about the possibilities. And I talked about this before. For every water job, you have a potential for a pack out, asbestos or mold, or even reconstruction to occur. What if your company was able to provide some or all of these additional services? I'm going to take that and I'm going to hold it for a second, because obviously the next paragraph discusses the revenue. I'm also going to tell you something that, you might hear from Dick, you might hear from some other people, but it's anecdotally proven to me many times over. Companies that provide a full service approach or a turnkey approach have a much greater chance of success with their marketing strategy as well. Specifically, if you're dealing with plumbers. Dick talks a lot about differentiation. One of the things that differentiates you from other restoration companies might be the fact that you are a full service company. So if that plumber refers you, they can feel trustworthy in you that you're going to help that customer all the way through to the end. Sometimes restoration companies who just do restoration are going to leave the customer high and dry. And now, who does that customer go to for the repairs? And is that level of service going to be to the same care that you provided? Obviously, if you're searching out plumbers, you're going to be really worried about that plumber's relationship with their homeowner. You know, that's a big part of that sell. And part of that sell is, hey, we're going to make sure that we're thinking of you all the way through. We're not going to do a great job on mitten and screw up the repairs. So obviously you need to have a good repair company if you're going to do it, but just think about what that relationship does. Is that going to generate more leads? I think it will, but even on the ones you're already getting, take that lead and multiply the resulting revenue, and you're on the road to giant growth. I've seen companies go from 2 million to 5 million just by adding additional services before adding on more marketers, just taking the work they're already doing and getting more bites at the apple or more squeeze out of the fruit, as I said before. So you have to ask yourself, is it time to expand your company? Guys, take a long, sober look at all of your investments and ask yourself if you're getting the most out of every dollar. I'm here to tell you that maybe these ideas are crazy for you. Maybe all 5 of them would be tough to implement, especially all at the same time, because they will require more capital. You know, opening up a different division is going to require a lot more capital, let's just say, than hiring a salesman. But the capital outlay for each of these is going to give you a return that, in my belief, is going to be much quicker and much more predictable and much greater than just throwing it into those first suggestions of either equipment or marketing. I'm not saying you shouldn't invest in marketing. I think you should always be looking to invest in marketing. But I think if you looked at your company and saw what's there already and took a sober look at a best place to invest, I think you might have to reconsider, you know, that new truck in favor of that new salesman or that new CEO, or creating a division, or investing in some technology, or investing even in a guy who's going to do your invoicing and collections. Think about all those things. And if you have any questions whatsoever about these topics or any topic you've heard from myself, Bill Giannone, or from Dick Wagner, please feel free to reach out to us. Our website is www.thecrestnetwork.com. That's thecrestnetwork.com, just like you see it up on top. Dick at thecrestnetwork.com, Bill at thecrestnetwork.com. Finally, before I head out of here, I just want to remind you that we also have a podcast channel. It's called The Crestcast, and we are on Spotify. We invite you to check us out. You'll hear a lot of really good tips and ideas on there. We have these webinars a couple times a month, and these really are much more of the long form, I would call it, whereas our podcasts are anywhere from 8 to 15, maybe 20 minutes, talking about much more specific single topics. So I hope you'll join us there. On behalf of Dick Wagner, I'm Bill Giannone. I want to thank you so much for joining us today. We thank you for your participation in these webinars on Tuesdays, and we thank you for being part of the Crest Network. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you real soon. Have a great week. Bye-bye.